property settlement note. That sounds kind of complicated, doesn't it? Sounds like something you might hear on Law and Order. Well, it is actually. So what is a property settlement note and what does that have to do with divorce? Well, I bring this up today because I was working with a client that I actually suggested that her and her client, or her attorney, talk about the possibility of including a property settlement note into their divorce negotiations. Why? That sounds really odd. I've never heard of it before. Why, how could that be of use? Especially when the divorce negotiations are so complicated anyway. Why do we need to make it more complicated? Well, let me tell you why I think it would be a good idea to consider for this particular client. So my client was a woman. She owned her own business, and her husband didn't own his own business, but he worked full time and they had kids. They're probably like 40 years old, so they're about the age where they are starting to accumulate some money, especially in like retirement funds and in equity in their house. So, splitting up money and making it fair in divorce at that age does start to get a little bit tricky because especially when one person feels like upset about the divorce and they get emotional and they make it harder to split the assets up 50-50 because they involve like personal feelings into it. And so it ends up being a fight about everything. So that was the case for this client of mine. Her husband was pretty upset about the divorce. I don't really know the whole backstory, but he was making it pretty difficult to arrive at an agreement on how to split up the assets. And then they were also fighting about the kids, which I talked about in another video, which makes it a lot worse. But just here doing my part. I wasn't helping with the kid part. Um, so for them, he had two trigger words. He was super upset when you would say the word alimony and super upset when she talked about his retirement funds because she had put all of her effort and her money into her business, so she didn't really have anything accumulated in any sort of account in her own name. He had been working for about 20 years and over the years had put aside, a substantial amount in retirement savings. I think it was about 500,000 in like his account at this time, pre-tax, of course, but that's a lot compared to what my client was facing. She did have the value of her business, but she had no like liquid assets to walk away from the marriage with, which is where the property note came in. So anything revolving around alimony was making him upset. Anything revolving around taking part of his retirements made him upset. But she needed to get something somewhere. So what I suggested was a property settlement note. And what that is note is basically like a fancy word for loan. It's an old school word. So it's basically a loan where he would pay her over time the amount that she would have gotten if she would have taken some of the retirement funds away or got alimony instead out of the divorce. Because I know alimony might be a trigger word for you too, especially you men. You really don't like the word alimony, but in some cases, alimony is necessary. And in this case, she would have been owed something. So property settlement note would have been a way to avoid all those things that was making the negotiations just stall because they were just butting heads about it. So a solution to it would have been, okay, pay what would be considered her fair share of like the marital assets in a property settlement note. Let's say it's 200,000 or 150,000, and break that 200,000 up over a period of like 5 to 10 years, and he would systematically pay it off over the 5 to 10 year period. And you do pay interest on notes payable. It's not a lot. It's not like you're making bank with the interest, but you can expect maybe 3 to 5% interest on these loans. And you may ask, well, why doesn't he just give her cash instead of a note? That doesn't sound, very good for him. Well, in their case, they didn't have cash on hand. They didn't have a bunch of money just sitting in a savings account. I'm sure you don't either. Not a whole lot of people have big, huge chunks of change just sitting in a savings account that they can use in this sort of situation. So a note payable, breaking it up into smaller affordable payments over a couple years is doable. So they're working on that now. We'll see how it goes. But at the end of the day, divorce negotiations is really about coming at avoiding those trigger words. So in their case, his retirement funds was off the table, as well as any alimony, because not that it wasn't due to her, but it was making negotiations just stall because that was something that really irritated him. So my suggestion was, well, let's try to circumvent these trigger words and find something else that would be good for both of them. So that was my proposal for this particular client. Again, each person is a little bit different. A divorce financial analyst can help you brainstorm these kinds of ideas, and of course, an attorney is the one who makes sure that it's legally suited for your specific case. But just an idea to throw out there for you, a property settlement note. But if you're going through these divorce negotiations, I feel for you. They're not very fun, but try to not rock the boat too much. Try to play it cool, avoid those trigger words, and keep your chin up because you are an overcomer. If this video was helpful to you, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And sign up for my newsletter. It's on divorceowl.com/opt-in.